When it comes to Kobe being Bryant, he is highly regarded as one of the best players in NBA history. But over the past couple of years, I have slowly but surely noticed the same old Kobe narratives creeping back into the NBA community. And for today's video, we'll look at Nick Wright and some other guys and debunk their takes and once again set the record straight. And first up, of course, we do indeed have Nick Wright talking about Kobe and his 81-point game and it being worse than Luka having 60, 20, and 10.
But I'm going to give you a couple reasons why Luka's game yesterday is the best game any of us have ever seen. First of all, the context of it. His team's down 9 with 35 seconds left. In the last 20 years, 13,885 teams have been down 9 or more with 35 or less seconds left. You know how many of them won? Well, 1 now. It was 0, now it's 1. Second reason, he's the only guy in league history that could have done that. That could put up that stat line. The missed free throw rebound putback, which we see teams try a dozen times a week and no one ever executes. Well, listen, with every great sports moment, there's usually a bit of failure by the opposing defense.
So, as you can see right there, Nick Wright ranked Kobe's 81-point game behind Luka and actually third on the greatest games of all time. Now, let's start this off by saying Luka Doncic, of course, had a great performance, dropping 60, 21, and 10. But I will say Kobe's 81-point game, in my personal opinion, is the best game ever from a single player. And looking at Kobe in 06 for Toronto, of course, he had 81 points, 6 boards, 2 assists on 61, 54, and 90 splits. And obviously those raw numbers are highly impressive, but adding even more context, this game gets even greater. As looking through NBA history, when a player drops 60 plus points all time, Kobe has a high scoring game with 50, 40, 90 splits. Until this day, he is the only player ever to score 70 plus points with those shooting splits. And funny enough, the second place finisher is also Kobe with 65. And looking at 70-point games in NBA history, there are a total of 12 of those games. And for Kobe, in 70-point games, he played the lowest minutes total of all time at only 42, compared to Luka versus the Knicks, who played 47 and also had overtime. And speaking of late game play, when it came to Luka, of course, he was clutch and historically great. But when it comes to Kobe in his fourth quarter, Luka doesn't even sniff him, as Kobe vs. Toronto in the fourth had 28 points, the third most all time, on 54% shooting. And looking at his Lakers team, outside of Kobe, they only had 3 points from Lamar Odom. And even more impressive, in that fourth quarter, Kobe single-handedly outscored Toronto 28-19 by himself. And going one step further, looking at Kobe versus both teams, he outscored them 28-22. Now, all that right there is pretty much common knowledge, but what people forget is Kobe in the second half was simply phenomenal, having 55 points, the most in modern NBA history, on 64, 55, and 93 splits. And once again, outscored his Lakers team 55-18, and outscored Toronto 55-41. And one more point I do want to make, looking at teammate help, that is a very important thing to add for Kobe as well as Luka. As in Kobe's game, he only had 2 players, I repeat, 2 players in double figures. That being Smush Parker, who had 13, and Chris Mim, who had 12, compared to Luka, who had Dinwiddie, Christian Wood, as well as Hardaway, all in double figures. Now, the last thing I do want to throw in there, looking at Kobe, in this game all time, he ranks second in game score, only behind Jordan in 1990. I want to be crystal clear in saying this, Luka vs. the Knicks was historically great, but compared to Kobe, those 81 points still reign supreme. And looking past Nick Wright and that awful take, next up we have one guy who tops that, saying Shaquille O'Neal is better all time than Kobe.
When Shaq showed up in the league, Shaq was that guy from the door. Not only was he that guy from the door, he was that guy from the door who basically completely changed the game. If we had a guy that was running around in the NBA today who was breaking stanchions and tearing down backboards, I mean, we're talking about the NBA being completely different. He basically brought back the big man who was dominant.
So, cutting him off right there, I wouldn't say Shaq necessarily changed the game of basketball straight off the jump. Yes, he was a dominant center and all-time great big, but in the 1990s, he didn't change the game from the jump, and even in the 2000s, he had no real impact on big men and how they played. And I would definitely argue someone like Dirk Nowitzki had more of an impact on the modern day bigs with his shooting and outside play. And tossing that point aside, his most egregious statement was saying Shaquille O'Neal brought the big man back in the 2000s, ignoring players like Hakeem Olajuwon, Alonzo Mourning, David Robinson, Patrick Ewing, and so on and so on. And looking at Shaq pre-Kobe, his success wasn't as great as you would think. As in '93, his first year, he missed the playoffs going 41-41. The following year, '94, he was swept 3-0 by the Pacers, '95, swept 4 by the Rockets in the finals, and '96 beat 4-0 once again by the Bulls in the Eastern Conference Finals. Shaq at that point 100%, despite not winning much, was still a top 10 player, one of the best bigs in the game. But I'm sorry to say, it's a fact he never won one single finals game until he got Kobe beating Bryant.
Not only did he bring back the big man who was dominant, they built that Laker unit around him. And not only did they build that Laker unit around him, when Kobe Bryant got there, he was the best player on that unit. He was the best player on that unit on all their championship teams. Not only was he the best player on all their championship teams, he was the most dominant player in the game.
Now, stopping him right there, his overall points were definitely pretty solid. But one thing I will add, Kobe in '03, I personally think, was better than Shaq for that season, as he put up 30 points, finished third in MVP voting, was first team All-NBA, as was first team All-Defense. And unlike Shaq, he was healthy the entire season. Even looking at '04, his last year with Shaq, for the Lakers that year Kobe was their leading scorer and finished 5th in MVP voting compared to Shaq, who was 6th. And even looking at '01, before Kobe's absolute prime and peak, that year in the playoffs, he averaged 29.4 points, and even in '02, put up 26.6. And looking at '01 in particular, heading into the finals, Kobe was averaging 31.6 to Shaq's 29.3 points. And looking at round-by-round scoring, in the second round Kobe was LA's leading scorer, and the conference finals once again led to LA in overall points per game. Let's not get it twisted, Kobe at this point wasn't just some dude, he was a top 5 player, borderline top 3, and depending on the night, could be LA's best player and even better than Shaquille O'Neal.
He was the most dominant player in the game. And when him and Kobe Bryant broke up, he still was a dominant player. So we have a guy who won the NBA championship, won the finals MVP 3 straight years. There's nobody in my generation, with the exception of Michael Jordan, who could say that they did that. Nobody, except the big man, which is Shaquille O'Neal. That's one of the main reasons why I have him ahead of Kobe Bryant.
I do find it pretty funny looking at Shaquille O'Neal. We always focus on his 3 straight championships, which definitely are impressive. But for his entire career, he has tons and tons of duds, swept series, and blown leads, whether it be in Orlando, Miami, or even Phoenix. And when it comes to Shaq vs. Kobe debates, one thing I love is looking at Shaq post-Kobe and Kobe post-Shaq. As Shaq minus Kobe was a 1-time champion, 0-time MVP, 0-time Finals MVP, 3-time All-NBA, a 4-time All-Star, and averaged 18.5 points on 60% shooting up to his last All-Star season. Compared to Kobe, who post-Shaq was a 2-time champion, 2-time Finals MVP, 1-time MVP, 12-time All-Star, 9-time All-NBA, 7-time All-Defensive, and up till 2013 was averaging 28.6 points on 45% shooting. Looking at both Shaq and Kobe, it is undeniable Kobe was more successful minus Shaq. And one thing I do want to highlight, when it comes to Kobe's 2 championships and 3 straight finals, post-Shaquille O'Neal, he did that without a top 10 player in a very tough and competitive Western Conference. I'll say it once again, Kobe post-Shaq was more successful, and he got 5 rings to Shaq's 4. And with that being said, that is the end of the video, and that was the worst Kobe takes debunked in less than 15 minutes. As always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next time.